Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 5 says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not unto thine own understanding. Verse 6 says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. I'd say everybody needs a little bit more of God directing their paths. My name is Charles Vance. I'm along with Chief Strategist Terry Sacka. You're watching The Wealth Transfer. Terry, great to see you today.
Great to see you too, Charles. And matter of fact, welcome. I know this is beyond probably a couple shows now to Saturday morning. I know we are not only on Thursdays at 10 p.m., we're also on Saturday mornings on 10 p.m., same station. So welcome all those.
10 a.m.
I'm sorry, 10 a.m.
People are going to say, man, what time did I get up?
Yes, 10 a.m. on Saturday mornings. So welcome to the program. This is a program designed for the biblical principles and the global economics and how to protect and preserve your family's wealth. So what we do want to let everyone know, Charles, I know, is we're going to get a little more into a news format where we want to really lay out a lot more detail about the global economics and some imagery so you can really kind of see, not just hear for yourself, because the biggest problem I think we've been finding is the deception of the knowledge the world is giving us versus what God said in the Bible and the wisdom that he's trying to get through to us.
Terry, first of all, I want to tell people real quickly that we're not doing this program just on a whim. Our church, our ministry, I've been in ministry for many years now, pastored a church for over 20 years. I still carry a general contractor's license. Prior to that, I was a general contractor, owned a retail store, and some various investments. Finances has always been something very interesting to me from a biblical perspective. So I've spent years of my life studying what the Bible says about finances, because you can hear anything in a church world, in a church setting. I found out that at the time, West Virginia was the poorest state per capita in the Union. And I found out just because you're in the midst of poverty doesn't mean that you have to be poor.
That's right.
If you position yourself spiritually and mentally and materially, you can have wealth transferring to you instead of from you. That's what this program is about.
Yes.
Now, we met you 3 years ago or so and had you as a guest on our national television program because of the expertise that you have concerning finances in the world. You have got some credentials that I can't remember them from show to show. Tell people what your qualifications are.
I think the reason I think we really hit it is when we were having the conversation, and I just love the Lord and know that, in the spirit of the word that there's a lot of revelation knowledge. Charles, all of a sudden, he had the biblical as a pastor, and I had this knowledge of the mining industry and the hard assets, and we were realizing there's some deeper understanding here. And so myself, I come from the financial advisory world. I had a Series 763.5 from A.G. Edwards. I used to deal with retirement accounts, and I'm an accredited asset management specialist, but I am the chief strategist and analyst here at Cornerstone Asset Metals, and I deal mainly in the information, because I really believe the best investment is in education. And what's coming here, it's really vital that we understand this. And we've had some people, Charles, I know I mentioned, people do talk a lot about, maybe next program we can talk more in detail, just maybe a little on it. But people do, there's a lot going on around there with the harbingers, and people have heard about the Shemitah and how God had this cycle of 7 years. And we're in the third and final Shemitah of this cycle since 9/11 and 2008 markets crash, and then how it's lining up with the fourth blood moon of Sukkot in the Jewish calendar. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next time. But the reason what we're talking about here is ironic is not only is there this biblical prophecy that people are seeing that looks pretty bad for the near future, but what we see in the system itself economically, the global shift economically, and this is what we're getting at.
Even if there were no biblical systems or things that were running back, repeating itself and flowing over and over again, even if none of that were in place, there's some stuff going on in the world that
no doubt
everybody needs to pay attention to. One of the things that's going on, you call them, the world system calls it the BRIC nations. Is that right?
Yeah,
and
this is
are we going to talk about that some today?
That's what this program is going to be today. And we will probably, it may be today and over the next couple, maybe 2-3 weeks, we're going to give the BRIC nations a look and in a lot more detail. We're going to do it in a way that'll kind of help you see exactly what does that mean, but more importantly, how it impacts your standard of living in the future and how it impacts your retirement and your family's preservation.
Now, the BRIC nation people are people that produce bricks, correct?
No.
Listen, there's a lot of people
I
listening
know.
to us that don't have a clue what you're talking about.
The BRIC
tell us
nations,
what you mean.
The BRIC nations are a group of countries, and it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These 5 nations have agreed to, now we have to first understand that the dollar is the world's reserve currency for finance, for trade, and more importantly, oil.
Tell us what you mean by that, because there are people that don't know what you mean reserve currency.
Yeah, meaning that the dollar, the U.S. dollar is what you use for business and finance. So if I'm Kuwait and I want to buy a product from Japan, they would first buy a U.S. dollar in the open market, and then Japan would buy a U.S. dollar, and then they would do a business deal. They would never really trade in their own currencies. So number one, the dollar was always used as the center of a transaction, and the dollar is used for the petrodollar. And by the way, in the next few weeks after we do the BRICS, we're going to get in detail what the petrodollar is and how that impacts, and you're going to definitely want to see that, because we contend, aside from any biblical prophecy, what is coming is a global shift in the ability of the dollar to be on its own, the dollar to be supreme. We believe we're going to be marginalized into a system, which we already are factually, so this isn't something that's a surprise, but how that impacts we the people and how it impacts our standard of living and the preservation of all we've worked hard for retirement.
So basically, the nations that are doing business in the world had to use the U.S. dollar as like a universal currency.
Yes.
Or a worldwide currency.
Yes.
So they had to get the dollar from somewhere originally. They had to get the U.S. dollar, the Federal Reserve dollar, from somewhere in order to do business. I think that it was reported that when Saddam Hussein's regime was broken down, they found somewhere there in the main area where he was, they found a tractor trailer load full of dollars. U.S. currency.
And that's every country, and we'll get into that more with the petrodollar as to why. But the BRIC nations are really unique because what was never in the past, and remember now the dollar became dominant as a world reserve currency. We've just gotten off of the monetary system explanation in our programming here. And the reason we want to transition into the BRICS is because now we've shown you how, and if you haven't seen the program, please go to Cornerstone Asset Metals website, and there's something called the Wealth Transfer Archive. In there is a library of video, and you will see the national currency and U.S. monetary system. There should be about 3 or 4 programs where we talk about different monetary systems we've had in this country. The reason this is important, we have seen so many different monetary systems in our nation. We're in about a 40-year, almost 50-year time frame where we really believe a new monetary system is coming. Problem is, if you're on the wrong side of the fence on that, your 30, 40 years of hard-earned wealth will evaporate, be marginalized, your standard of living, your ability to transfer to your children, your children's children, if you're in the system on the wrong side of the fence. We're saying for your retirement, your IRAs, your 401ks, your inheritance money, there's an enormous amount of inheritance money coming in, is in jeopardy if you're focused into the fiat system of currency. Because the BRICS nations are vying to take this dollar down, and I'll explain in detail, of course, today and over the next few weeks why. So for those that do have IRAs, real quick before we get going, 401ks, and you have them in the market system, be extremely cautious, get properly diversified into what I call God's money, Because remember, Haggai 2:8, the silver is mine, the gold is mine. These hard assets are your protection, and you own them. Give us a call, register on this website. We will send out this information that not only details what's going on globally, economically in the U.S., but how simply and easy it is to roll over your IRA or your 401k into a precious metals IRA. Let us know. We're here to help educate the body of Christ. Remember, it's not about going to Cornerstone. It really is about being educated, but we feel really passionate about making sure you get that knowledge, because in the body, if we have the protection, when this goes down, we have the resources, not just for our family, but for the churches, the ministries, and to feed those that won't have that ability. So,
Terry, you mentioned fiat money, and you held up a currency, a piece of paper currency. I was in the bank just the other day to do something that they had messed up on one of my accounts, and sent me an email. I walked over to the guy at the desk, and while I walked over, there was a thing that was propped up that said FDIC.
oh, good one. Okay.
And I took my phone out and actually took a picture of it, because the bold letters was backed by the full faith and something of the U.S. government. And I told the guy that was waiting on me, I said,
this is really important, by the way.
I said, do you know what the FDIC is? The banker. He said, I do know what it is. And he smiled great big. I said, the FDIC is not owned by the U.S. government. He said, I'm aware of that. I said, the FDIC is an insurance company that is formed and owned by the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not the federal government. It's the people that manipulate our currency. And he just smiled. He knew all of that.
And this gets deeper. Now, number one, that's true. And remember, your retirement system is in a brokerage of some kind. Your currency is in a bank. I hear so often people say, oh, I'm not concerned because I have FDIC insurance. You must understand, number one, the rules of banking. Number one, and this is in 2011, since Dodd-Frank law was passed, the first people to get paid back are derivative holders. Second, secured creditors. Third, if a bank collapses, is you. You're considered unsecured. FDIC only has $25 billion in the account. There are hundreds of trillions in derivatives. You'll get pennies on the dollar. But here's the worst part. You think you're going to get your money back. I'm telling you, it's not there to give back, number one. If they had to do it in order to obligate, the government would have to print trillions and trillions more of currency
and
notes.
It's not really the government printing it.
Well, no,
they would authorize the printing.
They would authorize the printing and then allow the Federal Reserve to then distribute it to the banks to pay people. If they
but it's
did
all
that,
paper.
I know, but if they did that, this skyrockets.
Sure.
So that's one point. But number two, what was so important, the Federal Reserve System, the FDIC, 90 years, if you read the rule, 90 years they have to pay you back.
Oh,
Think
wow.
about it. So they don't have to pay you back right away. You got to catch the details. Remember, they always say the devil's in the detail.
Well,
they're not kidding about that.
It was the last count that I read. The last account that I read is less than 1/2% of deposits is what they have, which is crazy anyway. Because if anybody knows how the fractional system works in the banking, they have loaned out up to 60 times the amount of money that's on deposit, which fractionalizes the FDIC money that's there on deposit even less. And the money that's on deposit is paper. It's an asset on the side of the bookkeeping.
Because it's not remember, it's not silver certificate anymore. It's just paper.
Or
so
a gold
it's a difference.
certificate. It has
nothing,
nothing to back it.
That's right.
Now, we started talking about the BRICS nation, Brazil. Do them again for me.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
South Africa.
This is really important. Now, what they're doing, the reason they're called the BRICS, they formed an alliance. And this alliance says we as nations will do trade with each other in our own currencies.
So they're cutting the U.S. out.
They're cutting the U.S. out. Now remember, the reason this is important, the reason we're getting into the banking detail a little bit, was because everything you have is in the system of the world that is controlled by a very thin veil of security. You think it's safe, it's not. we're saying be really cautious and diversified, because in order to protect and preserve your family, when this stuff happens, you're going to really potentially lose a lot of what you've been working for. So the BRICS, by aligning and cutting out the dollar, are starting to basically decrease demand for the dollar. And here's the problem.
No, on a worldwide,
Yes,
a worldwide basis.
on a worldwide basis. Problem is, 2/3 of the dollars printed are overseas in banks. 2/3. So when the demand decreases because of these agreements, and there are more to come when we get in the details, the dollars will start to come home.
How are they going to get the dollars home? They're going to say,
We're just going to sell them.
We want our
back
currency
to us.
back.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't want to sell them for more American
no,
US dollars.
they'll take their dollars and just sell them into the market. They don't want them anymore.
Okay,
so they'll sell them
they'll
and buy
get-
something else,
They'll get their currency back by selling them. in a
or they'll
worldwide
buy another
market.
currency.
Okay.
Like if I'm Brazil, Russia, India, China, if I'm Russia, they'll just buy the Chinese currency then
Gotcha.
with a dollar. So they'll use their dollars to buy other currencies. What do you do with the dollar? Well, the dollar has to come back to the United States eventually.
So it almost ends up floating, and you correct me if I'm
It's
wrong.
true, float.
But it almost ends up floating like in a market.
Yes.
That nobody wants it anymore.
Right.
So the price of it begins to go down. The value of it begins to go down.
Yes, that's the point.
Because it's a supply and demand.
It's supply and demand. Now, granted, I know what they're saying in the talking head world, that the demand for dollars initially right now is a little bit higher. I know, but it's still the only truest alternative. What we're saying is we're so close. There's reasons Ukraine, the Middle East, the Chinese-Russian relationships, there's reasons that these things are happening that show that the dollar dominance is on a brink. Now, granted, we love our country, but the point is here, we're trying to protect the body of Christ for what's coming. The BRICS are vying for control. They're trying to destroy the dominance of the dollar, and by doing trade in their currencies, as Charles was alluding to, the dollar then goes into float, comes back home. Why is that important to you now? Because if more of these come home, as they're going to, this happened in the 60s, and if many of us remember what happened in the 70s, the heavy inflation, if these dollars come home, which they will, inflation picks up, potentially hyper if it's not managed properly, so everything you're holding will lose tremendous buying power. And the best example, these were equal back in the 60s. This was a silver certificate. You took them to the bank, you exchanged it for a silver ounce. They were equal because it was backed by silver. Back then, they both bought 5 gallons of gas. Well, today, if I just went out and sold the silver, because they divorced, remember, in 71, finally the gold standard ended. If I go sell the silver today, I can still buy the same 5 gallons of gas. Matter of fact, I could buy a little bit more, probably 6 gallons, I believe, right now. So in 40 years, I can still buy 5 gallons and more than I did then. How many gallons can you buy with this? Not even a quart, not even 1 gallon. So the point being that they used to be equal. Those who stored their retirement and hard-earned wealth in this became wealthier because they're still buying a lot more gas, but those who stored their wealth in this have become a lot poorer in their purchasing power. And why is that important? When the BRIC nations attack this way, as they start maneuvering this, they're going to attack the dollar, as Charles just alluded to, put it into the float. And what we're saying is, we're fighting it now. That's what Ukraine's all about. But when this hits, overnight, that dollar is going to lose a lot of value, and you're going to get stuck. And we don't want to see that. That's what this is about, is educating you.
Years ago, I was day trading with some stuff, not an outrageous amount of money, but I had invested maybe $5,000 or $10,000 in a company that had gotten all kinds of rave reviews. It was an exercise company. And my investment of about $10,000 within about 3 weeks had gone up to something like $70,000 just that quickly. Somebody came out with a bad report. The FTC was going to do an investigation. Now, this company was not worth anything less, but there was a bad report that came out about the company, and the stock began to plummet. Now, I'm not saying that the stock wasn't really worth anything, but in the perception or the minds of the people that owned it, it became valueless because there was an investigation that made it look like something criminal was going on within this company. I tried to sell mine. It ended up being worth about $5 by the time that it was all finished. No one wanted to buy it, was my point, because it looked like it had no value.
Yes.
Although the company was still in existence, it was still operating just like the United States is still in existence, and the Federal Reserve Bank will still be in existence.
Yes.
But if everybody quits using it and thinks that the value, and they put all of this back into this money market, trying to get rid of it, and nobody wants to buy it, this is just going to plummet in value.
Now, people don't buy that right now. They don't believe it. And I know, they don't believe that the dollar is that close. They think we're going to be dominant 20, 25 more years from now. And so there's the argument, okay, but what I contend, number one, beyond the prophetic Shemitah and blood moon and what we saw in 9/11 and 2008 and what I really believe is coming more, but more importantly, how much money we printed, and what's really going on globally with the Russia-China, the BRIC nation relationships, don't think that this isn't an attack on our sovereignty or our authority globally, because as Charles just alluded, that's exactly right.
But
overnight, the dollar will not be as desired. It'll still be around.
And that's the key,
that's the
desirability
key
of it.
Yes.
Because if it's not desirable, it has no value.
There's a reason the Chinese currency is trading now and setting up international trading hubs around the world. They're now in the London. They're now all. There's a reason these currencies are rising in dominance. The dollar, the facts of the dollar, used to be literally everyone used it. Now we're down to not even 60% of the world uses the dollar in transactions. There's all these other reserve currencies. The euro is one of them too, right? The dollar's losing it. Now, what the argument is how fast and when this takes place. We're saying it's going to happen overnight, and I think potentially supernaturally.
But really all we have to do is look at the history from when they took us off the gold standard. All you have to do is look at the value of a product from the earth, God's products, the things that He made, in relationship to the amount of currency at that time that it took to buy it, and now the amount of currency that it takes to buy the same item.
Exactly, right? For
and
instance,
that's
right
what you
here.
were talking about with the gasoline.
Yeah, because this used to be equal. This is a silver certificate that was $1. They bought 1 ounce of silver, they were equal. Today, it's almost $21 of currency to take an ounce of silver. So there's a lot more, meaning the currency has lost a lot of value. So for those that have IRAs and 401ks to protect, for those that have you're the ones working for this,
and
all of your hard.
And this is a long-term thing.
Middle term to longer term.
Right.
This is for the preservation of your family, preservation of your standard of living.
It's not get rich quick. This
Absolutely
is not a
not.
get rich quick scheme.
No, but the thing is, you should have been doing it all along.
Right.
This is the deception.
What if people had been doing this from the 70s?
We would be millionaires today.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the point. But you were going. I didn't want to.
No, I'm just saying
interrupt you, but I
because
just
of
wanted
that.
to tell you.
Yeah, because if we would have been doing it all along, but let's say right now, a lot of people think, oh, that's just over now, everything's okay. They're making it look like the economy's better. I'm here to tell you it's not even close to being better. Most of the numbers we see are false numbers. They're skewed radically. And the real information, we're going to have a reckoning soon. Something is coming in the near future that is going to rock and shock us in the United States in a way we've never seen before, and we probably will never see again. So for those that have IRAs, 401ks to protect, you earned them. Put them in a diversified hard asset so you own it. Nobody can control the risk on it because it's yours that you could even pass down to your children. Register on the website, give us a call. We'll send out this package loaded with the data that'll show you what's coming, and at least what's going on now, how simply and easy it is to roll over your current IRA into a precious metals IRA so you can be protected. Because remember, this is about what we've been doing the last 5 years, the money printing. So let's show real quick, just to give you an idea, image number 9 about the money printing. This is the fiat money quantity that's in the system.
When you say fiat, you're talking about fake
currency. Yes, fake
currency.
Look at that right there. Now this goes back to 1960 from the left to 2010. The red line was the progression of the banking crises, pre-banking crisis, but it was the exponential growth curve. We were already printing money into the system because we had bad debts. We were already a deficit spending nation. The blue line, if you notice from the 60s, kind of paralleled the exponential, and that's what they were counting on. As long as it paralleled right there, we were okay. But you notice how it just absolutely takes off in the '08 collapse. Look at the blue line now. I hate to tell you that blue line is a lot higher right now. It's 2 trillion higher than even right there. That's the fiat money quantity in circulation. Now, when you have that kind of detachment, you can take it off. When you have that kind of detachment, the world system is saying, wait a minute, we're paying for the dollar's demise or the dollar's inflation or debasement. And this is where the BRIC nations come in.
The devaluing of the dollar
is printing
is because it's being printed so much.
That's right.
But that's not just happening in America.
Oh, it's happening globally.
It's happening globally.
I believe what's coming is not just America, by the way. This could be a global, what I see is almost like a global reset. I won't even be surprised to see a global world war, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm saying this could be a global reset because everybody's printing. Because the group that is doing this in the BRIC nations that are forcing the dollar's hand right now are the Brazil, Russia, India, China. Look at this map. This is image number 6. This is the map of the BRIC nations now. These BRIC countries have made agreements with each other. Now look at that right there. All those countries in green are the BRIC nations. You see Brazil down there, India, China, Russia. They've kind of forgot a little tip of South Africa there, but that green region, that's the BRICS. Those countries are vying against what we're doing here in the West. Now remember how important this is. The West has been in control of the financial system for a long time. Though that area that was green shaded, those are the BRIC nations. And they're rising powerfully in a way to challenge the West. There's a big East-West thing going on. You probably didn't notice that map. In the middle of that, right in the little hook of that area, Ukraine. And what's really not good about that is Ukraine is vital for energy to Europe. So we're going to get more in detail in explaining what that means in the BRICS next week, now that we've introduced it. And just know, for those that have IRAs to protect, register on the website, give us a call. We'll go ahead and send out this package, how simple and easy to roll it over and protect yourself. And just know next week we'll pick up the BRICS in more detail. And remember, if you haven't made Jesus Christ the center of your heart, ask him in, because he'll let you know the truth and it shall set you free. Good night.
You can watch these programs on demand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on Cornerstone Asset Metals website. I encourage you to tell somebody about the broadcast. We're on at this same time every week on this station. We'll see you next time, same place, same time.